Are you ready to welcome near you Kimi in 2025?
Kimi Räikkönen, sorry.
Antonelli nearly into the back of his teammate. Antonelli has got past Russell. Russell has got past Antonelli again. Kimi Antonelli wins.
George Russell is losing to an 18-year-old, not just losing races, losing the championship.
Hey, worst case scenario for Antonelli. George Russell trying to hang on to fourth place. He's got Hadjar up the inside.
Losing the development war, losing the team that promised him everything. Kimi Antonelli has been in Formula One for less than 2 seasons. He leads the 2026 World Championship by 25 points. He's won 3 of the last 5 races, and Mercedes is building cars that suit him better than the driver who waited 3 years for this seat. This isn't Russell's first time in this position, except last time he was the young driver taking someone else's future. Now he's the one being erased. And we've seen this story before, in the same team, in the same garage, with a driver named Nico Rosberg, who won a championship just to prove he was never the chosen one. The question is whether George Russell will rewrite the ending or become the next driver Mercedes uses up and moves on from. Nico Rosberg won a world championship and quit Formula One 36 hours later. Here's why George Russell should be terrified. Let's go back to 2010. Michael Schumacher returns to Formula One with Mercedes. Alongside him is a young German driver who came up through the junior categories, a driver who spent years waiting for his shot at the top. Nico Rosberg is 25 years old. He's quick, he's professional, but nobody calls him a future world champion. He's the other guy. For 3 seasons, Rosberg drives in Schumacher's shadow. He outperforms him. 3 years. 3 victories in the internal qualifying battle. But the narrative never shifts. Schumacher is the legend. Rosberg is the placeholder. Then Lewis Hamilton arrives in 2013. The team's real investment. The man Mercedes built their hybrid era around. And Rosberg watches. He watches Hamilton win the 2014 title. He watches Hamilton win the 2015 title. He stands on podiums, gives team-friendly interviews, and smiles through the slow realization that he has become the number 2 driver in a team he helped build. Then, 2016 happens. Rosberg changes. He becomes colder, more calculating. He wins the first 4 races of the season. He exploits every weakness Hamilton shows. He refuses to yield, refuses to be the loyal deputy, refuses to accept that his role is to support the star. He wins the championship by 5 points. And then he walks away, because he knows, even in victory, that Mercedes never saw him as their future. He had to burn himself to the ground just to prove he belonged in the same conversation. And now, a decade later, George Russell is reading the same script. Kimi Antonelli wasn't supposed to be this good this fast. Mercedes wasn't supposed to choose him this early. And George Russell wasn't supposed to be the obstacle. When Mercedes announced Antonelli as Hamilton's replacement for 2026, the narrative was clear. He was the future, a generational talent. The next Verstappen. But the future wasn't supposed to arrive in the present tense. Antonelli has won 3 of the last 5 races. He leads the Drivers' Championship with 179 points. 25 ahead of Russell. He's doing things in a Mercedes that Russell, with 7 seasons of Formula One experience, cannot match. And it's not just the results, it's how they're happening. At the Canadian Grand Prix, the 2 Mercedes drivers went wheel to wheel for multiple laps, banging wheels, ignoring team radio, racing each other as if they drove for different teams entirely. Russell held position. Antonelli demanded a penalty. The team stayed silent. Toto Wolff didn't intervene. No team orders. No priority given to the championship leader. Just 2 drivers in identical machinery. left to settle it on track. The message was unmistakable. If Russell wants to beat Antonelli, he has to do it alone. At the Spanish Grand Prix, the pattern repeated. Antonelli won. Russell finished off the podium. And for the first time, Russell said publicly what had been building privately. The car's development path was favouring Antonelli's driving style. The set-up windows, the tyre performance, the predictability through high-speed corners, all of it, Russell argued, had been optimised for the rookie. The team denied it, but the numbers don't lie. Russell is 68 points behind his 19-year-old teammate. He's being outqualified, he's being outraced. And the car he's driving feels less like his own, with every upgrade Mercedes rolls out of Brackley. Russell earned his contract extension. Mercedes gave it to him without celebration. That tells you everything. Here's what makes this story different from Rosberg's. Nico Rosberg had a multi-year contract. He was secure. He chose to leave. George Russell doesn't have that luxury. When Russell signed his most recent Mercedes deal, the contract was structured around performance metrics, targets, benchmarks, a clause that gave Mercedes an exit if Russell failed to deliver, and gave Russell his future only if he met the numbers. Earlier this season, Russell activated that clause. He met the criteria. His seat for 2027 is locked. He told ESPN that his future was in his own hands, that he'd done what was required, that it was a matter of when, not if, the extension would be confirmed. And then the contract was activated, quietly, without fanfare, without a team statement celebrating their driver's commitment. Russell is staying at Mercedes. But nobody in Brackley seems particularly happy about it. Toto Wolff has publicly called the Russell-Antonelli pairing the team's long-term future. He said Mercedes is building around both drivers equally, but actions speak louder than press conferences. The car development favours Antonelli. The team radio favours Antonelli. The podium celebrations, the ones that matter, feature Antonelli. Russell is being tolerated, not celebrated. While Russell fights Antonelli for Mercedes' future, Lewis Hamilton is stealing their present. Hamilton's Ferrari arc has become the subplot that threatens to consume the entire championship. After a slow start, adapting to Maranello, Hamilton has entered a blistering run of form. A win in Barcelona. Back-to-back podiums. He's now 32 points behind Antonelli, closer than Russell was at the same point last season. But Hamilton's real advantage isn't his pace, it's his freedom. He's not fighting his teammate. Charles Leclerc is a rival, not an enemy. Hamilton arrives at every race weekend with one job: extract the maximum from the Ferrari. He doesn't have to look over his shoulder at the other side of the garage. He doesn't have to wonder whether the upgrades were designed for him or for the driver next to him. While Russell and Antonelli take points off each other, Hamilton collects. The Canadian Grand Prix was the perfect example. Russell and Antonelli spent half the race fighting each other, wheel to wheel, lap after lap, while Hamilton drove a clean, untroubled race to the podium. The Mercedes drivers bled time. Hamilton banked points. This is what makes the Russell-Rosberg parallel so dangerous. Rosberg won his title in 2016 by beating Hamilton in the same car. But the cost was everything. He had to become a version of himself that he didn't recognize. Ruthless, single-minded, isolated, and even then, he barely won. 5 points. One race. Russell has to beat a teammate who is 19 years old, outrageously talented, and being actively favoured by the team's development direction. And while he fights that battle, Lewis Hamilton, the man Russell replaced, the legend he was supposed to succeed, is positioning himself to steal the championship from both of them. There are 3 ways this ends. The first is the Rosberg ending. Russell finds the ruthlessness. He wins the internal war. He beats Antonelli in the same car, against the current of a team that has already chosen its favourite. And whether he wins the championship or not, he proves, definitively, that he belongs in the conversation with the sport's elite. The second is the Bottas ending. He accepts his role. He becomes the reliable number 2. He collects podiums, wins the occasional race when Antonelli has a bad weekend, and spends the rest of his career being asked when he's going to challenge for a title. Safe, respected, and forever in someone else's shadow. The third ending is the one nobody's talking about. The one where Russell walks away. Not to Alpine, not to a midfield rebuild, but to a team that wants him, that builds around him, that sees him as the centre of their project, not the obstacle to someone else's. Russell's contract is locked for 2027, but contracts mean nothing in Formula One if the driver on the other side of the garage is being given better tools. The truth is that George Russell is good enough to be a world champion. He proved it in Bahrain in 2020, stepping into a car he'd never driven and nearly winning on debut. He proved it in Brazil in 2022, taking his first Grand Prix victory in dominant fashion. He's proved it this season, winning 2 races in a car that, by his own account, doesn't suit him. But being good enough isn't the same as being chosen. Nico Rosberg learned that lesson a decade ago. He won his championship and still walked away because he understood that Mercedes had never truly been his team. He was the placeholder, the bridge between Schumacher and Hamilton, the driver who was good enough to win, but not good enough to be loved. George Russell is staring at the same realization. And the question isn't whether he's talented enough to beat Antonelli. The question is whether Mercedes will let him try.